Hello friends and welcome. Patch 7.36c just came out, immediately invalidating my tier list position 5s, and you guys didn't even get to see the position 4s that were going to come out tomorrow. Whatever, it's in the past. So this patch is mostly small buffs, and what the heck, Hephaestus, we just set up and now you're gonna move. Whatever. Okay. It's mostly small buffs and nerfs to a lot of this stuff. There's a couple like weird changes, I guess. Like, I don't fully understand why they're buffing or nerfing in certain ways. So let's just do the highlights. We'll talk about the major things. Item-wise, Arcane Blink, the cooldown is being nerfed by 2 seconds. It's going to restore more health. I don't think that's a big deal. It's mainly a targeted nerf towards Tinker, in my opinion, which is probably deserved and a lot of people are going to be happy with, even though I don't think his win rate is that great, but it's a very frustrating build with the way his innate ability now works. So I think that's fine. Arcane Boots going to be nerfed a little bit. You don't have to worry about it. It's not a huge nerf. I still wanted to talk about it just because how popular it is. It's one of the main boots support players buy. And 0.25 of a nerf, you're gonna feel it in cases, but it doesn't really change it. If you need mana, you're gonna buy Arcane Boots. If you're building like one of those other items like Greaves afterwards, you're gonna get Arcane Boots. If you don't, you might leave it at Brown Boots or the Tranquil Boots. The decision does not change. It's gonna be even more important to dispel Soul Rend from whoever it's active on, because it will no longer do the damage after it's been dispelled, which I think it did before. It's just kind of hard to see this in the middle of a big team fight. But considering how much damage can happen from Soul Rend, this is an added bonus to dispelling it. It was already kind of important to dispel Bloodthorn because of the silence and all the bonus damage it was doing, but now even more so, you are rewarded for doing that. The rest of these are mostly small nerfs. Meteor Hammer still has a weird identity. Like, I don't even know if Storm's going to build anymore now that it has less amp, and just because it has a cheaper cost, I don't think anyone... Like, you have to buy a Kaya. If you didn't want to build a Kaya, you're not suddenly like, well, I don't know, 25 cheaper mana Meteor Hammer, maybe I will, right? I still think it's weird. The one I will highlight for you guys is Silver Edge. It's going to have an extra second of break duration. I think this on its own is not going to suddenly bring back Silver Edge, but as one of the few sources of break, I think it's worth keeping an eye on, that as heroes that are... certain heroes become popular and they're weak to break, and maybe there are other heroes like Shadow Demon is bad and suddenly you have no breaks available, like Silver Edge goes up in value that way. So maybe there will be other buffs to Silver Edge, or maybe there will be shifts in the meta, so it's worth keeping an eye on. I didn't think Abaddon even needed a nerf, but Aghanims is being nerfed. So maybe you guys were doing this in your pubs a lot and it was too good. But I almost never saw this, so this one was a little weird to me, but I think it matters more in pubs, so the Aghanims is worse. Small buff to Ancient Apparition, small nerf to Axe, small nerf to Bounty, small nerf to Brewmaster, small nerf to Centaur. It's all little small nerfs. Actually, I will say from 4 base HP regen to 3 is maybe more noticeable, especially because Centaur with Double Edge works off of his own health. So that one I'm going to keep my eye on a little bit more. The innate ability being nerfed, I think this part is not a huge deal. But this one, maybe it's a bigger deal, but not that big. I still think he's a really solid offlaner. Small nerf to Chaos Knight, and then Clockwork is being nerfed and changed up a little bit. He was at the top of my position 5 tier list. He was at the top of the position 4 tier list as well, like maybe A to S tier. I think he's still going to be good, but jumping down to the power cogs nerf, so from 15 seconds to 21 second cooldown at level 1, and then 50 mana burn to 35, it was really easy to just constantly walk up to people, pop power cogs, kick a cog at them, hope for like 1 or 2 bounces. That would get you 100 mana burn, like 50 to 150 mana burn. Huge at like level 1, right? Suddenly that's a whole spell or 2 that the enemy does not get in the laning stage, and you got your value, you got your damage, really good. 5-second duration on power cogs, so by the time it ends, there's only 10 seconds before you could do it again. So you're just burning people's mana in the laning stage. Super annoying, and that is being nerfed, and that's fair. Like, I get it. I was the guy doing it, so it was really fun, but I was on the receiving end before, and it sucks. It sucks to deal with. So I totally get the nerf. By the end, by the max level, I think it's the same. So if you're playing with expanded armature, I think maxing power cogs was pretty viable, and I think it's almost mandatory now with this nerf. Hookup is the other facet. And hookup, you're going to max battery assault. I think I haven't really tested this build yet, but battery assault max like the old way. And I think this power cog nerf will not matter as much to the hookup build. I think though, you're only going to want this facet if you have someone else to initiate for you, like Axe to blink in and call, and then you hookshot follow up. That's going to give you the refunded cooldown on hookshot, and at max level, it's 7.5 seconds. That's really low. 275 physical barrier to you and your ally, and then in that 300 radius, you're stunning everyone and doing that damage every 7.5 seconds. So I think that's pretty cool. I think it's gonna, I'm gonna try it out. You're probably going to need arcane boots or some kind of mana item, because if you're using your ultimate off cooldown, or not off cooldown, but like at a lower cooldown, you're going to start burning through mana along with the rest of your spells. So I think arcane boots or a null talisman, like some kind of mana item is going to be necessary if you do go for this facet. I think expanded armature still works. It's just nerfed. Probably put them in like A to B tier currently, but gotta try him out before I can like really feel if, you know, maybe it doesn't even matter. Maybe he's still just an S tier hero. Darkseer is one of the best offlaners in the game, and I don't really feel this hurts him that much, but I'm not a Darkseer player. I think the other facet is good for the laning stage. Heart of Battle is a bit better for the team fights later on, and it's getting nerfed a little bit, but 8 to 7% is like whatever. And then, yeah, like 10% off Wall of Replica, 0.25 stun off. They're nerfs. I don't think they're that big of a deal, but maybe Darkseer players, you can share a different opinion in the comments. Dark Willow is going from one of the best supports to not fully sure, but I actually think she'll just be like a decent support in the right games now, compared to being busted pretty much every single game. So Thorny Thicket is still good. It's being decreased 6 to 4 second duration for the extra brambles. The usual brambles are actually also being decreased from 15 to 12 seconds. Fair, it's really good. I actually still think it's probably fine. It's more balanced. The part that really hurts is that Bedlam is no longer castable on allies. Position 4 Dark Willow doesn't really mind going Blink Yules. That's actually a pretty solid build for her, in which case Bedlam can still just be around you doing tons of damage, and I think it'll be okay, but you're kind of forced into that build as opposed to having options and being able to just throw Bedlam on your offlaner or mid, whoever's going in. So it does hurt. Position 5 Dark Willow is going to struggle a lot more because you don't really have the option to be as greedy to get a Yule's Blink or just to get items to be tankier, to be up close. You wanted to stay in the back, spam Thorny, Bramble Maze, whatever it's called, Bramble Maze. It's literally right in front of me. And then Bedlam your allies, and that's gone from you. And you wanted to buy like support items like Glimmer, Force Staff, Solar Crest, whatever, stuff like that. And if you do that, it's just way harder to use Bedlam. Now for farming, it's kind of the same, but for kills, which is a big part of Dark Willow, part of her strength is the overwhelming damage from Bedlam. That's gone. I still think the Brambles are pretty crazy to deal with in the laning stage. Like, I've won a lot of laning stages before I even get Bedlam. So that's why I think she'll still be a decent support. Better, much better as a position 4 now than a position 5. But I think there's probably still room to work with it. I'll give you guys an update after I try it. Small buff to Dragonite, Drow Ranger, Ember. You guys can read this all yourself. Enigma, way slower. 10 move speed off. The Eidolon damage is being nerfed a lot in the early levels. By the end, it's about the same. Their health will be a little lower. For pubs, probably not the end of the world. The pro scene will care a bit more about this. Faceless Void, they really want Time Zone to be a thing. I think it has to be a support Faceless Void who is doing Time Zone. And for that, the laning stage needs to be buffed in some way. So they need to add time dilation to this facet, or give him some like bonus regen or something to make him a support. And then that support Faceless Void will take Time Zone, because I really cannot see a core Faceless, like even if you go offlane Faceless, I cannot see why you would not just take Chronosphere compared to Time Zone. I think it has to be a support Faceless who might still take Chronosphere, but would be more willing to take Time Zone. And until you can solve the laning stage, I don't know if it matters how much you buff Time Zone, until it becomes like absolutely ridiculous. Smallish nerf to Hoodwink, maybe like medium-ish. 50 cast range off is a little sad, but I think she'll still be okay as a support. Invoker buff, I get this. Honestly, it sounds more like a bug that it wasn't working this way rather than like a feature it's now added in, but whatever. Small buff to him. Legion, I don't think this facet is like, all your supports, in particular the supports, I think, that need to scale with damage to make this worth it. But there's also more risk, because if you lose the duel, the enemies all get bonus damage as well. But if you take the other facet, the Stone Hall plating or whatever it's called, right, there's only benefits. You only get the barrier, and because you're tankier, you're willing to duel at like lower health, and you may not have dueled before like that. Or you're using the laning stage, right? There's only positives to the other facet and no negatives. This time, if you lose the duels, you are giving away a bunch of damage. I just don't think this is worth it compared to the other one. Small nerf to Leshrac, small nerf to Lich, Frostbound, and I think this is actually a buff. I think the illusions didn't count for anything before, so now they count as a creep kill. So I think that's actually a buff for Growing Cold. If it used to count as heroes, then that's a nerf, but not a massive nerf. I still think Lich is a really good position 5 for pubs. Pretty sizable nerf to Lifestealer from 2 extra HP to 1, and in most games it was pretty common, like 300 last hits and denies. Not that crazy to reach in the late game for a carry, and that would be like 600 health, if not more. And now that is going to go down to 300 health. You will get health from hero kills, 5, but I don't know, let's say you had like 10 hero kills, that's a pretty good amount. 50 health doesn't really compare to that 300 you're losing from just normal last hitting, and it's way easier to get tons of last hits compared to getting tons of hero kills. So I think this is a pretty sizable nerf, along with the fact that the open wound slow is 15% slower at, or 15% less slow at level 1 compared to where it used to be. Small buff to Lone Druid's unpopular facet, Mars. They're trying to buff Victory Feast, but I think the other facet is just way better. Like, you have to get a kill with your ultimate to then get the health restored. The other one just blocks the vision, and it will matter when it matters. Like, if the enemy has BKB, then whatever, they were getting out anyways. It's when they didn't have BKB, that's when their teammates need to save that guy, and now they can't see him. So I think the other facet matters way more when it is needed compared to Victory Feast, which if you're killing the guy in the arena, right, that means you're ahead anyway. So the health is potentially overkill. I know it will matter in certain situations, but I just think the other one is going to be more consistent than this one. Medusa, they're trying to buff Mana Pact, but mana is health for Medusa, but it's much harder to regain mana than it is to regain health. For most carries, you pop Satanic, boom, like a 3,000 heal really quickly. There is nothing like that for mana, except for Bloodstone when it's broken, but Medusa, Bloodstone, it doesn't really work. So to give up mana for attack speed, it's a cool idea, but I think it's really, really risky for Medusa compared to the other facet, so I'm not really sure if this is going to be enough. Naga Siren, Deluge cooldown. I was looking at it for support Naga. It's a pretty good conversion for mana to damage, but I don't have a fully fleshed out idea for Naga support, but I'm thinking about it. Nature's has been in a weird spot. He's getting some buffs to both of these. It's a good chunk of damage for the Ironwood Treant, and even the regular Treant if you end up going with Soothing Saplings. I know many of you are sick and tired of Nature's, but I will be testing this in the next few days, and I'll let you guys know. I'm really not sure how much of a meme this is, or like maybe this one's better. I gotta try it out more, and I'll let you guys know. There's gonna be some race car necros with this facet, but I still think the other one's better. Night Stalker, a lot of these are pretty minor nerfs, except this one right here. Dark Ascension no longer refreshes cooldowns of basic abilities, so that is the big one that really hurts Night Stalker. However, I think Night Stalker's Night Reigns facet, he was winning the lane before he even hit his ultimate, and that was a lot of the pressure you felt. Now, of course, being able to refresh your abilities is what lets you then get kills, and like Conda Night Stalker is probably kind of dead, not having like the refreshed cooldown on your Void, but winning your lane and then being a Night Stalker who can still blink, jump people, like that's still pretty good. So I think overall he'll still be a solid offlaner, just not as good as before. Could be wrong. Maybe this is worse than I thought. Small buff, don't think it's good enough. Small nerf, still strong hero. Pango, slight nerf to this hero. Don't think it's a huge deal. Slight buff to PA, not a huge deal. Pudge, the hook facet is going to be slower. No longer increases projectile speed, which is sad. It's a big part of it. I think as long as you still have setup on your team, it's fine. But even when you do, there are times you just got to hit the hook and times where you don't have teammates to set things up and you got to land the hook, and losing that projectile speed is going to hurt, which means the Pudges in your games are, if they're on your team, It might be more griefy pudges if it's in the enemy team. Maybe, you know, maybe it's an easier game now, but it is going to hurt the viability of pudge. I think these changes are not as big of a deal as the projectile speed, but it is just a bunch of different nerfs. Slight buff to Razor, slight buff to Sand King, Shadow Fiend, some nerfs across the board. Shadow Rays stacking with this facet is just a bit weaker, and then the bonus damage is a bit worse. I think this like 15 damage off the stack will matter in some of these first bloods that Shadow Fiends can like solo kill the enemy mids with some good raises. So it hurts, but I think a big part of why he came back into the meta is Necro Mastery, just having it as an innate ability. And okay, you don't get souls from like killing cogs and wards and stuff, like whatever, you know, the main feature of Necro Mastery is still there, and I think will still make him a pretty solid hero. Silencer's change is interesting. So the mana cost is cheaper at level 1, which will make it easier to spam out in the laning stage, but at max level, it's a little more expensive, 5 mana. I think if you can get more harass in at the start, maybe that gets you a kill, maybe it gets you a new intelligence point, and that helps cover this extra mana cost later. So I think this might end up being a buff to Silencer if you can apply more pressure early. If you can't for whatever reason, then your late game is going to be harder when you don't have intelligence and you're dealing with higher mana costs because your ultimate is super expensive. But if you can get that harass in, that damage in, then I think this might be okay. Slark buff, linger duration is going up, and I want to highlight the default that you just start with, 1 second longer. That means if you're hiding behind the tree in the laning stage and then you run back out, 1 second longer of 10 HP regen, so 10 more HP than you had before. Or you're running to gank someone, or not gank, you're like in the lane, you're surprising the enemy offlaner. You run at them, you have 1 extra second of 6% increased movement speed to close the gap, hit them, and then save pounce rather than have to use it right away. And the linger radius is shorter. So I don't know if this is enough because I'm not a Slark player, but leash mechanics got changed in a way that's favorable to Slark. This Barracuda stuff keeps getting better. Like, we're dangerously close to Slark coming back in, guys, and it scares me, but we got to be ready for it. Keep your eye out on it. Snapfire, 5% more damage on Lil Shredder. Pretty interesting. It's some decent damage. I'm going to explore it a little more. I did when the patch first came out, and it felt like okay, but it didn't really make sense with full bore, so kind of stopped doing it. 5% more? I'm going to try it again, especially because Phoenix is really good, and the astute among you will notice Phoenix didn't get nerfed. What the heck? So Phoenix is still going to be really good, and Snapfire's Little Shredder is one of the best spells against it, if not the best. So maybe that's the case for Little Shredder Max. I don't know, but I will try it out. I'll let you guys know. They're trying to buff Scattershot, but I rarely have extreme opinions in Dota. Like, I try to stay very open-minded. I think Scattershot's absolute shit. I think this is garbage, guys, and I don't think this will change that. Small buff to Spectre, in particular, is Desolate Damage, which there is a facet that allows you to do a reduced amount even when a hero is standing near creeps, but not near enemy heroes. So that, in combination with this, could start adding up. Like, I think it would be 15 damage at level 1, with level 1 Desolate, I mean. So that's pretty meaningful. That's a lot of extra damage. So maybe Spectre's climbing up there. Spirit Breaker nerf, again, cheaper at level 1, which is where I often have the mana issues from when I used to play more Spirit Breaker, but it's 20 more at max level. And this is where I haven't played him recently, so I don't know how it feels in the build. This will strain your mana, but I don't know how much of an issue it is because I haven't been playing a bunch of Spirit Breaker myself lately. But if you can't charge as much, because once you get in the late game, like the charging, you want to charge everywhere, right? Charge the creeps, charge wherever, split push, gank all the time. So 20 more mana each time, it really does add up. You used to be able to charge 6 times, now it's like 5 times. So it will matter, but I think depending on your itemization and like what neutral items you get, it won't matter that much. So I think he'll still be a decent hero. Storm, one of the better mids, some nerfs across the board. Really interesting, the Static Remnant will have a lot less vision on it. I guess because you could use it to scout with Static Slide, but it's fine. It's just not, I didn't expect it. I was really surprised when I read that, but it's a nerf to him along with the other stuff. Small buffs to Sven's facets. I'm curious about Sven's support. I was told Entity ran it in the recent qualifiers, I didn't catch that game, but could be interesting. Sven support's always fun. I didn't think it was a thing, but I mean, if they literally just qualified to TI running it, then maybe it is, and it just got better, so I will take a look on that. TA, another really popular core hero right now, nerfed, in particular, the barrier. Essentially maxes out at what used to be the level 2 barrier. It will, at all levels, only be 30, only, compared to, you know, what it used to be, but whatever. This is still good for nerfing the hero. Small buff to Tidehunter, quality of life change for Timber, nerf to Tinker. This strong dispel is gone. It's now going to be a basic dispel, which means if you are stunned up, you will still be stunned when your defense matrix breaks. If you're silenced, that'll be fine. That'll be removed with the basic dispel. So pretty big nerf to core Tinker, along with this talent switch. AoE laser being moved to level 25. That is so much further away. These are pretty painful to the Arcane Blink Tinker build that had recently come up. Hef stun being in the camera. Oh, you want to come up to this camera? Rise, Hef. All right, rest of the video like this. Tiny, slight nerfs, Treant, shard nerf, whatever. Troll, 2 max stacks less. This matters a lot versus objectives, and then late game fights versus the tanky heroes, like the other tanky carry. So it could be pretty impactful, but I don't play that much troll to really understand how much 2 fervor stacks like really translates to. But it is 60 attack speed in the late game, which, I mean, that's like a moon shard, or not a moon shard, the hyperstone. So yeah, pretty meaningful in terms of killing. Okay, fine, get out of the video, get out of here, be gone. Can't exploit the cats. Nerf to Underlord, nerf to Ursa, small one. Venge, this is a funny one. I don't really get this because I think support Venge was actually in a pretty good spot, and with this magic missile nerf in particular, 0.3 seconds off of the level 1 stun and damage off the scaling throughout all of the levels. That's pretty painful. And then the talent, which is also good for utility, also nerfed. So I thought support Venge was in a good spot. Gonna be worse. So if you liked her, sorry guys, I liked it too. I guess they sold the Arcanas and they're ready to move on. But core Venge, which I think is better than support Venge right now, this is a nerf to that. But it's not that much of a nerf to it. So maybe they want to push the identity to core. They like this like soul strike facet. I don't know, but it's, yeah, just be aware of it. It's once you max it out, it's the same, but your laning stage has always been a little bit of the awkward part for Venge, and that's what's getting hurt here. Visage is getting buffed for the one Visage player out there. Warlock nerfed a bit. I really don't think this matters all that much. 200 health off of the Golem health at max, and then 10% off Chaotic Offering on Champion of Goroth. Like, I know it matters, especially once you're at Aghanim's Refresher, stuff like that. But also a lot of games are decided before that, and that prior to that, these numbers are not that big a deal. And for pub games, whatever. I still think he's going to be like the #1 pub support in the game. You guys know I love Weaver, and he is not really being hit that hard, in my opinion. Shikuchi, Skitter Step nerf, 0.1 second slow duration, whatever. Geminate attack, 5 damage off, whatever. It's still a free second attack for free at level 1, so I don't even care about this 5 damage. Shikuchi mana cost, that part matters a bit, especially when you play against someone who drains your mana like Clockwork or Lion. But in most games, 5 mana, I think you can deal with it. You might have to buy a little bit more mana regen, but whatever. Talents, slight nerfs to it, but if you guys have been having as much fun with Weaver support as I have, I think he's still fantastic. Witch Doctor, Voodoo Festoration, radius reduced, self-heal from 50% to 25%. I think this is going to drop Witch Doctor from the pro first phase ban level, but in your pub games, he was a good hero before Voodoo Festoration was even a thing, because people get too close for the cask bounces and the ults and all that. And so the fact that Voodoo Festoration is getting nerfed a bit, fair, deserved, totally deserved, because it's busted in pubs, still seems like it might be okay. Just you have to be a little bit more restrictive with when you use it, and you can't just freely run in with as much healing. but the damage to mana ratio is still really good, and maybe you just have to buy like another Tango that you didn't have to before, and then I still think you win your lane. Maybe not against some of the longer ranged heroes, but any melee hero, like you still just walk up, 600 radius is enough, and then once you get a couple levels into it, like 750 will be enough. So I'm not sure that if this is enough of a nerf, but it's a warranted nerf. And then 20 mana cost to reincarnation, whatever. Lots of small buffs and nerfs this patch, so I don't know if anyone is majorly sticking out, like, oh, this is a cool new thing to try. I'm going to be trying this hookshot facet. I just hadn't gotten to it yet, and it keeps getting buffed, so I'm going to give it a go. Let me know if you think there's anything I should try. For you guys, if you want to know what's good, I'm not totally sure, but Phoenix, I think, is a very safe spot to start because it just didn't get touched in these nerfs at all, which is kind of crazy to me. So Phoenix 4 or 5, really good. That would have been in the position 4 tier list. So if you're not sure, just go with that for now.